Hello, welcome to the From Seeds to Shoreline project overview. This 15-minute presentation is designed to provide some background on the From Seeds to Shoreline program and also outline the goals for the virtual training that will take place July 28th and 29th. At the end of this presentation, you'll be asked to watch a 20-minute video where you'll get to virtually meet some of the instructors and get you excited. Thank you for joining our network of educators who are involved in this program. Your participation is one way in which we can serve as good stewards of the salt marsh ecosystem.
During the virtual workshop, the training will address the following goals. We'll engage you in learning about the basic characteristics of the salt marsh ecosystem, including benefits and threats to this habitat. You'll also be trained on the specifics of the From Seeds to Shoreline project, including going over each step of the salt marsh restoration process, highlighting different resources for implementing the project in your classroom, and working with one of the instructors to develop a plan for the upcoming school year. Last but not least, we're going to empower you with the knowledge, resources, and support for using this program with your students. The first two goals are asterisked because we're going to go over those briefly during this presentation. All three workshop goals will be addressed during the virtual training. So let's kick off this presentation with a basic overview of the salt marsh. The photo on the left of your screen is a shot of a typical salt marsh here in South Carolina. The picture on the right shows the distribution of the salt marsh ecosystem in the southeastern United States, spanning northern Florida up through North Carolina. In South Carolina, we have over 560,000 acres of wetlands, those areas that remain wet for part or most of the year. Wetlands can include both fresh and saltwater systems, including salt marshes. 350,000 acres of our wetlands are considered to be salt marsh. All told, the Southeast has just over 1 million acres of salt marsh. Salt marsh typically forms around brackish water, found in estuaries and tidal creeks. Brackish water is formed when fresh water mixes with full-strength ocean water. In this diagram, the freshwater source is a river that flows towards the ocean, eventually meeting and mixing with it. Brackish water is not as salty as the ocean, but it definitely does not taste fresh. The amount of salt in a water body is called salinity and is measured in parts per thousand, or ppt. Freshwater typically has a salinity measurement of 0 ppt, whereas full-strength seawater is around 35 ppt. When those two mix, the salinity is somewhere between the two, resulting in brackish water. The salinity measurement of brackish water changes daily depending on tides, rainstorms, temperature, and other factors. In the previous slide, we mentioned that a freshwater source flowing and mixing with the ocean helps to form these brackish water areas where salt marsh grows. Most of the estuaries found along the South Carolina coast are the result of the influx of freshwater river systems mixing with the Atlantic Ocean. These rivers make up a complex network of watersheds throughout our state, connecting all of us together. So although you may live in the upstate or Midlands, the rivers in your area eventually make their way to the coast. In this way, we are all connected through this web of watersheds. Can you trace the rivers in your area on this map to its ending point on the coast? Now that we have a basic understanding about what makes a salt marsh and estuary, let's talk a little bit about why this ecosystem is so important. These benefits, or ecosystem services, are outlined in the diagram. Starting at the top with filtration, we'll make our way around clockwise, touching on some of the most important points for each of these ecosystem services. So starting with filtration, I don't know about you, but I certainly don't like to swim in dirty water, And I guarantee you that the animals and plants that live in and around the salt marsh don't like polluted water either. The salt marsh has a great ability to filter out pollutants that wind up in our waterways, cleansing the water and keeping it healthy for those animals that live and depend on this ecosystem. Next on the list, we have resting place for birds. When certain bird species make long journeys or migrate, often they need a place to rest and refuel. The salt marsh provides not only a great source of food in the way of worms, crabs, fish, shrimp, and even insects, but it also provides a safe place to rest until they can take off again. Next on the list, we have nursery ground. If you like to eat shrimp, crab, fish, or oysters, this ecosystem service is really important to you. The salt marsh and estuary serve as a nursery ground for the juvenile stage of most of the species we enjoy eating here in South Carolina. Once certain species reach adulthood, they can either head out to the ocean for the rest of their life or travel back and forth to the estuary and back to the ocean, depending on the season of the year. Flood mitigation. If you have ever walked in a salt marsh, you know that it's nothing like walking on a hard sidewalk. You actually might sink down and lose a shoe or two. The salt marsh acts like a sponge and is able to absorb a lot of water, which helps to minimize flooding during big storms such as hurricanes or high tides. Next on the list is nutrients. The salt marsh and wetlands in general rank as the #1 most productive ecosystem on the planet. This means that it edges out the rainforest, which we've commonly always given the #1 slot to. But wetlands rank #1 in nutrient production across the globe. Last but certainly not least is habitat. The salt marsh provides a critical habitat for lots of animals and plants, as we will see all throughout our workshop. Another ecosystem benefit has to do with climate change. Wetlands, including salt marshes, have the ability to serve as a carbon sink, storing greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and others in the soil. Wetlands can store carbon, what's commonly called blue carbon, at a rate 10 times faster than forests. This elimination and storage of carbon from the atmosphere helps mitigate the impacts of climate change, such as sea level rise. We've just outlined some really interesting benefits of the salt marsh ecosystem, and our story would not be complete without looking at some impacts to its future health and sustainability. One impact to this ecosystem involves development. Not only is there habitat loss, but there is the possibility of increased stormwater runoff that contains pollution and contributes to the overall degradation to this ecosystem. South Carolina continues to increase in population, which ups the demand for development and increases pressure on the salt marsh ecosystem. It is because of the ecosystem services and the potential threats to the salt marsh ecosystem that the following partners got together in 2010 to brainstorm a way in which a salt marsh restoration program could be developed for K-12 students and teachers in South Carolina. We decided to focus our efforts on growing and transplanting the dominant plant of the salt marsh ecosystem, Spartina alterniflora, due to its importance and visibility. Spartina alterniflora is one of 4 species found in South Carolina. In this photo, all of the bright green grass that is growing closest to the brackish water of the tidal creek is considered to be Spartina alterniflora. It also flowers. The photo on the left-hand side is a close-up of a blade of Spartina grass in full bloom during the fall of the year. Spartina alterniflora grows in what's considered to be the low marsh of the salt marsh ecosystem. In the cross-section diagram at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that the blue shaded blocks represents the estuary or tidal creek brackish water system. The shaded green part represents the low marsh, which is the area that is closest to this brackish water system. And then the other 2 shaded areas are moving away from the water and considered to be more upland, or mid-marsh and high marsh, sheltered a little bit more from the saltiness of the brackish water. Spartina alterniflora is one of the most interesting plants of the salt marsh ecosystem. Some of the interesting characteristics are listed below, and we will go over some of these in more depth during the training. Spartina is considered to be both a grass and a monocot. As mentioned before, it flowers, showing tiny little white flowers during the fall of the year. Spartina alterniflora is considered to be a perennial, which means it grows and dies every year. During the spring and summer months, Spartina alterniflora is a bright, vibrant green. In the fall, it takes on a golden brown color, and in the winter months, it turns a brown-gray color as the stalks die off and start to decompose back to the salt marsh. Spartina alterniflora is unique in the sense that it can grow in both salt and fresh water. For our project, we grow Spartina alterniflora in fresh water only. Spartina alterniflora is adapted to grow in saline or salty environments because it has special glands that can extrude the salt crystals from its stalk. Spartina has several ways of reproducing, one of which is through seeds. Other ways in which Spartina reproduces is through vegetative reproduction and rhizomes. Rhizomes is another name for the root system, which you see in the pictures on the right of your screen. Very few animals actually eat Spartina, the marsh rabbit being one of them. It's rarely eaten, but when it decays, it provides a lot of nutrients back into the salt marsh ecosystem. Spartina alterniflora has a hollow stalk and can grow up to 9 feet, or slightly higher than the highest tide. Spartina also has a great ability to filter the water of pollutants through denitrification and sequestration. And Spartina alterniflora is common and native to the southeast and Gulf of Mexico, but considered to be invasive on the west coast. So how did the From Seas to Shoreline project get started? Back in 2010, the partners got together and collected a bunch of Spartina alterniflora seeds, and then recruited a school to help us plant thousands of seeds that you see here in the photo. What we wanted to do was make sure that we could grow Spartina alterniflora before creating an education program. The research that we had done had suggested that Spartina seeds would sprout within 2 weeks. We waited and waited and waited, and nothing happened. After 2 weeks, we were worried that nothing would sprout and we would have to disappoint an entire 5th grade when, ta-da, we had our first sprout. What we found out was that we weren't watering the trays with enough water, and as soon as we upped the watering amount, we had sprouts everywhere. Now we were in business, and we could start creating the program. This is when From Seeds to Shoreline was born. Since 2010-2011, the goal and objectives have not changed. The purpose of the From Seeds to Shoreline project is to teach students and teachers about the importance of the salt marsh ecosystem by engaging them in a hands-on restoration stewardship project where they actively collect Spartina alterniflora seeds, cultivate those seeds, and then transplant their seedlings back to areas of the salt marsh. So what's all involved in the restoration part of this From Seeds to Shoreline program? There are 5 main steps that we are going to go over in more depth during the training. These steps include seed collection that occurs during the fall, seed storage that occurs during the late fall and winter, germination, which occurs during the late winter and early spring, cultivation that occurs during the spring, and finally, your restoration day, which involves you bringing your seedlings out to an area of salt marsh and transplanting those seedlings to areas in need due to erosion and other factors. Last year, Although COVID-19 hampered our Restoration Day plans, we still had a great success with participation. We had approximately 1,100 students participating from coastal counties and inland counties, 40 teachers associated with these schools, and we grew more than 66,000 seedlings with the efforts of our schools and partners. In summary, the From Seeds to Shoreline program is not only designed to teach about the salt marsh ecosystem, but just as important, the program aims to create long-term stewards by developing a sense of place of this beautiful and critical coastal area. You will be receiving a workshop kit full of materials, an agenda, and other information in the coming week. We look forward to seeing you on the 29th, and in the meantime, please contact us with any questions. We look forward to seeing you soon. Now, please click on the video link below to virtually meet your instructors and get a good overview of the salt marsh ecosystem and project. See you soon!